All right, hi Netta, hi Jim. Thank you so much for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. Today's date is April 7th, 2013, and the topic that we're going to be discussing is the Syrian Revolution. Just before we start, the first thing I wanted to tell you is that right now this conversation is being recorded, and after the recording is completed, I'll be uploading the video to YouTube. Are you okay with that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. And then on top of that, here at Vonvo, we want our conversations to stay both civil and valuable, and we don't want there to be any personal attacks against anyone. Are you both fine with those rules?
Of course. Always.
Okay, great. So then let's get started. Netta, would you mind just giving a quick background of yourself and why you're so passionate about this issue? And then Jim, you can go afterwards for all of our viewers.
Sure. My name is Netta. I just recently graduated with a health science major from Chicago. I'm born here, raised here all my life from Chicago, but my parents are from Syria, and I do have a lot of interest because, I go there and visit a lot, and I'm from there considerably, that my parents are from there, and I have such family there, and hearing them suffer every single day, hearing my country suffer really, really, stresses me, and it makes me feel like I have something to do and have a responsibility to help my civilians in my country. So anything that I can possibly do, I will put my foot in it to take that action.
Great. And Jim?
Yes, for my history, I have no family in Syria. I have, basically before the revolution, I didn't even know Muslims or Arabs. They were outside of my exposure. Wasn't because I wanted that, it just never had that exposure, but I had a friend that I was in the military with show me what was going on in Syria. I felt pretty much helpless because I didn't know anybody in the community here, so I reached out. I met Syrian Americans. They welcomed me. They supported my helping them and being in solidarity with them, and that changed my life. So since then, I know hundreds of Syrians. I'm involved in humanitarian rights for everybody, for all injustice around the world. But I'm most focused on Syria because of what I know, who I speak with in Syria, and my efforts are for the humanitarian disaster. My own opinions against the regime are not as important as the suffering that's happening right now. So I connect with anybody that I can, and I link people together, and I support truth that I hear from Syrians, not from U.S. sources, not from Reuters, Al Dawana, Sana, these other news organizations that are corrupt and have agendas. I believe action defines us and nothing else. And so I support the truth, and I support Free Syria.
Great. So, would you mind just, Netta, giving us your overall take, and we can move into these subjects, in regards to the Assad regime, would you mind just kind of going over, your interpretation of how they've been handling this revolution and what your thoughts are on the regime?
Sure, yeah. Well, the Assad regime was not something the citizens were considerably looking at or planning. All they did is they wanted their freedom. They wanted to preach their voice. They wanted to be heard. They wanted their rights, just like a normal citizen of any country. So it all started in Homs, Syria, which is a location in Syria. They just wanted, to hear voices heard. Unfortunately, the Assad regime didn't like that. They didn't like how they were speaking out. They wanted them to stay brittle and always afraid of saying anything, speaking out their words. So it's been almost a year. It's been March 2011, so actually a year and a few days. And Syria has been in continuous war and violence, causing the country and the citizens to distress really bad. The human catastrophe keeps growing, it's becoming very brutal, the victim rate is rising, and youngsters, especially youngsters, are suffering. Now, I understand that older people are getting injured. These youngsters are consistently suffering from appalling wounds, and the government is just continually doing that, and the forces just keep on doing it, specifically the Shabha that work with the regime. So far, 13,000 people, including 1,183 citizens and children, have been killed. Hospitals have minimum tools, minimum machines, so they're really, literally using whatever they have that can just keep them alive just for a few days, and sometimes people don't even make it. They lose their beloved family members. Either they remember their wounds from the history of the past of what happened to them. Not even that, but the conditions have been escalating very bad. People are getting raped, children are being tortured in front of their own parents, children are watching their own mothers being raped in front of the whole family. Try living with that for the rest of your life. Thousands of lives are being lost, families are being separated, the whole city is displaced, it's a catastrophe, the country is becoming very dysfunctional. Where is everyone? Where's everyone to help us out? I mean, I know we may not have the oil that other countries have, but we need people to step in to help us out, to hear our voice, because obviously the regime is just escalating with these harsh actions, and these people just need our help.
Right, and Jim, go ahead, and you guys can feel free to have your own discussion about these two topics, the couple of topics which Netta brought up. But go ahead, Jim.
I think everything she said is absolutely true. I would go beyond that and say that a lot of the catastrophe, it involves everybody. People have this false sense of security because they can remain ignorant and they can remain unattached to the situation, but that's only going to keep you secure for so long. Each and every one of us on this earth is going to actually pay for what's happened. As long as people are trying to keep separate from what the reality of what's going on, it's going to get worse and worse. I could spit numbers at you for hours, but the harsh reality is there's 4 million people inside Syria that have been displaced. Some of them as many as 6 times. 6 different locations. There's people living in caves. There's people that are not even allowed to leave Syria anymore. They're closing down borders because of this in these neighboring countries. So there's 4 million people that have been moved in Syria, and half of them are children. Okay, and anybody in all of humanity that doesn't feel that children should be defended, or that Syrian children are somehow they're not as meaningful as the rest of the children of this earth, we have a problem with that. We have a problem with this disconnected feeling, just because there's thousands of miles separating us, just because there's differences that shouldn't matter. And I think there's an indifference in the world, there's an apathy in the world, and just because of mistakes in the past doesn't mean we can't make good decisions for a future, for these future children. We're talking about generations that are affected. Syrian children are going to feel what's happened for many, many years. Not only are they maimed, have they lost limbs, but they've lost their education for 2 years. Many of them have been not in school for 2 years. There's a genocide of Syrian children's futures. We're talking the psychological damage that these children are feeling can barely be comprehended. You can't just go by numbers alone. You have to delve deeper into what's really happening. Yes, there's 75,000 confirmed dead in Syria, but go deeper into that. Let's talk about maybe what children in Homs, some children in Homs have seen, or let's go into into Aleppo and talk about what those children have. Okay, these psychological scars go beyond any kind of money that the UN misappropriately give to Assad to help his own people. You can't put a Band-Aid for a society that's bleeding to death. So, I mean, I ask for everyone to support the truth, to look beyond what our media is feeding us, because the truth is not going to be given to you. You have to find it. You have to look through the sources that have a reason to lie, that are paid to spread propaganda.
Well, I'd like to say
listen
something.
to all sides of the argument, and I think the media isn't really they're doing a disservice to the truth.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Netta.
That's all I had to say. I'm sorry if I went too long.
No, you're fine.
No, it's fine. You actually made a few points about I want to discuss media, and then another thing about children. You know, conditionally, what's happening exactly is parents don't even know what's happening to children. They're taking them, they're raping them, they're taking them. You know, they'll be walking around the street, just getting some fresh air, because unfortunately, there's nothing they can possibly do because of the conditions. The Shabihat that work with the Assad regime are taking them, they're torturing them to death. Parents are searching for their own children, don't hear of them within weeks, months, and they're just the parents are just, you know, praying that they will just see their son, hear of him, even if he's dead, just at least hear of his voice, see where he is. And conditionally, they never find out. But where do they find him? In a ditch, disposed in the garbage can. Not even, you know, any prayers upon his death, not even being heard. Try hearing this severe news to a parent. It's just really, really, really bad. And on top of that, you know, what you made a point about media, it saddens me a lot, is that media does not do a great job to actually foresee what's going on in Syria. They will say that they're helping, but they're not doing anything whatsoever. I mean, the conditions are brutal there, and it's so interesting because there are many Middle Eastern countries that America did step in, and I wonder why. Because there were many benefits for them, like oil especially. But Syria doesn't have that. So they say, okay, well, we don't need to step in. There's no need for us. We want to be heroes for other benefits. So that way they just step away and they think, okay, we'll just watch them. And to add on, the citizens don't see much going on. But for you, it's a great benefit for you to actually know these details, because you probably met someone in your life that shared that. But, I mean, for most of America, people need to be sharing these little stories because they make a difference.
Right, and Jim, anything
yes,
that...
I mean, I think...
Go ahead, Jim.
No, I couldn't agree more. Just to preface what I was going to say is that I help with a internet radio station, and you know, for right now, you know, it's just getting off the ground. So we're using sources that are in Syria, and we're using the local coordination committees in Syria to get the news out to the world. But beyond that, we started the whole thing. I'm helping with it because we want the stories of these people that are suffering to get out to the world. If I had to say a defining moment of why I got involved in this, it was because I felt the betrayal and the abandonment of people in Homs. I saw what was happening. I saw their courage, and I knew that these people were dying in anonymity. That not only were people dying to get truth out there by using cameras and video cameras, but also these people that were getting shot in protests. They were dying, and nobody in the world was seeing what was happening. And I felt, you know, moved to act. And I knew that the person I was seeing getting killed had a story. They had a future. They had sons. They had daughters. They had a family. There was more than just a number standing there before me that was unjustly taken. So that's what we are striving to do, is to get that emotional Syrians out there. So I can't agree more. When you hear for 15 seconds on the news how many people died in Syria or that they're car bombed, I could tell you that half of the words that are being used are improper. They like to use civil war. They like to use terrorists. They like to use jihadists. They use these words wrong, and they use it for an agenda and language, so that they can make others feel like it's something that is beyond their comprehension and that they should just remain ignorant for. And And that's the thing that really hurts me the most, is that the truth isn't being told. And that's what I work for. I want people to know what the true story is, beyond the numbers, beyond political regime change. This is a humanitarian disaster going on. Syria has experienced a Holocaust, a genocide. No other way to explain how a president who's been considered illegitimate by most of the world can be allowed to launch Scud missiles, of which he has 700 left, at 8% population. These things should not be allowed by the world community. And as Netta had said, I think a lot of leaders have become cowards of convenience. They see a situation where they they've studied the risk-benefit analysis, and because this has gone on for 2 years, they decide not to be involved. They allow the slaughter to go on, and Syrians are paying for this inaction. And I could tell you, just today I read that Hillary Clinton has come out saying that she supported weapons going to the rebels. She wanted to give that very meaningful support, the thing that they needed, not boots on the ground, but the weapons to take out these aircraft and tanks. She supported that. And so did other people that are in our government in the U.S. They supported action. And it wasn't for, imperialistic, it's not part of this conspiracy that people would love to propagate as propaganda. It's not for that. It's because people are dying. As we speak, I'm gathering that about 20 people died. And within this hour, there's about 20 people that died in Syria. So as I'm talking here, there's suffering happening right now. There's life ending right now. There's people being raped. There's people being slaughtered. There's artillery, mortar fire, tank fire, Scud fire, missiles, rockets. All these things are going into cities, populations, houses, just like you and I live in.
Right.
And the fact that governments and leaders are still having meetings over, that they're still arguing over what's a legitimate future for a political answer for what's next in Syria, is ridiculous. There's nobody stopping the bloodshed. To me, that shows the actions of the world are false. These leaders, they're all illegitimate. The UN, they are illegitimate in my book. Okay? How many observer missions have they had as Assad hit his tanks? Now they don't even hide that anymore. You can see on satellites whole cities have been leveled. So explain to me, what were those observer missions for? What is the UN for? The UN gives Assad money, the person that's killing his own people. I mean, explain that to me. Explain the actions of the leaders, not the words, but the actions. And
right.
Then you will see what the truth is.
And what do you think? What do you think should happen on that note? I mean, what do you sort of propose is the way for the international community to to try and affect this this outcome?
Given that I'm outside of issue, and I think there's a lot of problems with unity, but I think those problems exist for a reason. I think that from how it's been explained to me and what I've seen through actions, there are two separate moves, and there is the Geneva version of what people want next and what they define as a legitimate government for what's in Syria to be next, and then there's those that are in France they were people that lived in Syria for many years but don't anymore, and they support the people that are on the ground, the people that are dying, these people that want a mosaic to happen in Syria, that they want a peaceful coexistence of all different people in Syria. They want that to happen, but I think that the UN supports the Geneva part of it. They want Assad to be involved. They want his old cabinet to be involved next. And the opposition, they will not have dialogue with this person anymore. Assad has gone, has caused so much suffrage. They don't want him or anybody that's in the government right now. They don't want them involved because either they've made choices to side with the oppressor and allow genocide and allow the news networks that exist in Syria to lie about these Shaheed martyrs, or they're in it because they're forced to be in it. They're threatened with fear, they're threatened with death. Their families are under duress and forced to stay with the Assad regime. So I think when you have a government that's supported by fear, power, and outside forces such as Iran and Russia, with the profiteering that they've allowed to proliferate in the country to kill its own people, I think as long as that is what you're trying to push forward, there's no way that the people that are dying up on the ground for freedom are ever gonna to bow down to that. These people they've claimed to never want to go on their knees again. They don't want to be oppressed. They don't want a leader that's going to be oppressive coming next. Are there elements that are fighting in Syria that are extreme? Of course. There's always going to be people that come in when there's a vacuum, when there's a lack of leadership and a lack of control. There's going to be all kinds of elements that come into that situation. And I could tell you some of the extremists are on the side of Assad. Some of these people that create this chaos, create the sectarian division and violence, are actually working for Assad. So, there's propaganda on all sides, but as I said, you can listen to somebody talk, or you can follow the actions of that person. And from what I've seen, people fighting on the ground, for what they want next is a Syria for all Syrians. They realize that there are extreme elements that are fighting, and some of them are the best equipped and have the most successful missions when it comes to facing Assad forces. So you can't just illegitimize a whole uprising because there may be some extreme elements within that uprising. This uprising, like Netta had said, started peacefully, and this has been going for 2 years. And I can tell you, just Friday, there were many peaceful protests all over Syria.
Really?
So these are people not standing with weapons, not standing with Molotov cocktails and rocks. They're standing there locked arm in arm, weaponless, with more courage than all of our leaders put together, because they know what's next in Syria, and that is a Syria for all Syrians. And although they lived in 42 years of oppression, corruption, lack of opportunity, lack of basic human necessities, under the control of a minority, they know that with all of everything that's stacked against them, that they're going to be victorious. And that's what's given me hope for humanity. That's what's given me hope in this uprising. And I'm never going to stop supporting them, because I identify with that courage, and I stand with human rights and with all humanity.
Right. So what were you just referring to? People, there are actually Syrian people who are literally having peaceful protests inside the streets with this threat going on. They'll still do that?
Absolutely. And Max, if you were to go to my Facebook page, I could show you videos from Friday all over Syria. And I could tell you candidly that there are still people that only believe in peaceful opposition. They still, even after, say 75,000 confirmed, I would say 90,000 confirmed dead, and 4 million displaced, they still support only free, peaceful opposition to this Assad regime. So, I mean, if that gives you any indication of how courageous these people are, because I've heard countless stories of people going up to Syrian army at checkpoints, giving them flowers and water, turning away and getting shot. Okay? I could tell you that there are children that are shot daily in the streets. They have nothing, they're not a military target, I can tell you there's been pregnant women that have had their baby shot out of their wombs. Okay? These are the kind of sirs and cruel, moralists, honorless actions by the Assad regime. You know, are there human rights violations on the side of the opposition? Yeah, of course there are. We're talking there's a war going on. These people are fighting for their existence, for their freedom. And you've seen, or you've heard about some of these videos that propagate on YouTube of people being tortured to death. This is what they're against. I mean, I saw a video where there was a person that was on his hands and knees. His hands are tied behind his back. He's inside of a bombed-out building, okay? It's like an open building. These Assad army, they call this person's parents on his cell phone. You know, the mother's cell phone is, you know, the number's there. So they scroll down and they call this person's mother. And they said, look, we just want to tell you that we are for Syria. We're going to protect Syria. And your son, he is with the opposition. So we just wanted to tell you that for Assad, we're going to go ahead and kill him now. And they shoot him. While the mother is on the phone. They shoot him dead. He's bleeding out on the ground. They pick his head up. They slam it on the ground. You know, and these are the actions of people without any moral compass. You know, so I mean, these little facts, these YouTube videos, they're being pushed off YouTube by people that complain about them. So I mean, there's an army against truth, and there's an army committing genocide right now. So these are the actions that I see, and these are the actions that I try and defend.
Right.
The sectarian violence is there for a reason. It's there to create fear. It's there to put that seed of reprisal in everyone's head. That if you have a son that's an activist, if you have a son that has a camera, if you have a son or an uncle that has a scalpel that's helping in these medical clinics that are so desperate, they have no machines that they need, they have no medicines that they need, they have to remain anonymous. Can't even, I mean, Max, I could tell you there's people that are calling out for help in Aleppo, in Homs, in Damascus. They need medicines because there's wide epidemic diseases that are starting. Leishmaniasis.
Right.
And all these other things that are starting up because there's a, you know, it's thawing now. Everything's getting warmer in Syria. So the humanitarian disaster is just going to quadruple within months. So, I mean, these medical clinics, they can't even, they're so desperate they're asking for help, but they can't give their location because they're going to get targeted.
Right.
So, you know,
right.
this truth has to be out there. There's people that are dying with a scalpel, with a stethoscope. There's people dying with a pen. There's people dying with a camera. If it's truth, they're dying for it. So, you tell me, is it a civil war when a doctor is shot in his head because he's going to go to a medical clinic and stop some children from dying? That's not civil war to me. Is it civil war when a Scud is launched and it's completely ineffective? There's no aim on it, but it's launched into populations.
Right.
That's not civil war to me.
Right. So, Ned, are you there? Can you say something just to test?
Yes, can you guys hear me well? Sorry for the delay.
That's
Yes.
okay. So, Netta, would you mind,
Okay.
you know, talking about this concept of the sectarian threat that, you know, is kind of being experienced inside the country, and then we could also, you know, move into the whole reconstruction concept. But do you mind kind of talking about that?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Would you mind talking about the sectarian issues or the sectarian threat that's taking place inside of Syria right now, and discussing that?
Sure, that's fine. Basically, right now there's an insurrection in Syria, and it's basically caused many Syrian Muslims to go against the government in opposition of the regime. Most opposers against the regime would be considered Sunnis, but they mean no harm. They just want to preach their voice. They just want freedom. They want equality. They want to be able to walk in the streets and not Hello?
I heard that.
Okay.
I think Max might have cut out.
Okay.
Max sometimes has a few conversations at once going on, I think.
Okay. So yeah, conditionally that's what's happening, and they and you know, considerably no one is trying to separate or segregate Sunnis from Shias. We are all Muslims when it comes down to any religion, but unfortunately they're trying to make a distinction from Sunnis and Shias when we're all just Muslims. We believe in one God and we mean no harm to anything. We just want to be able to preach our voice. And what's happening now is totally not what was considered, what they were planning in the beginning, what anyone wanted. So, fortunately, that's the condition.
Yeah, I think Max was trying to expound on this argument that I've heard posed by pro-Assad people of how it's a Muslim Brotherhood fueled revolution, and it's this conspiracist Western Zionist idea of this nonsense, basically, that he hears from Assad people of how women are not going to have rights after the revolution.
Exactly.
If Assad leaves, women aren't going to have rights. They're gonna be in full black garb again, and they won't be able to drive cars, and just utter nonsense.
Well, that considerably is a different issue because that's in Saudi Arabia, so that applies to like the whole driving thing. That's more practiced in Saudi Arabia. Now, the women in Syria do have some they have freedom to in certain activities in their life. But in terms of in general, what I'm saying is like, my mom was born and raised in Syria, as well as my father was born and raised in Syria, and my grandparents and my cousins, and we kind of got lucky to move to America. My mom and dad, and I have a few other cousins that live here in the States, but they just, in general, there's so much things they can't express their ideas if it's against the government, if it's against anything that's affiliated with the government or the city or any of the industrial agriculture sector. They don't have their voice being heard, and if they do go against that, then they get punished for that. So that itself is something very unfair.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people that are pro-Assad, they would have you think, they want people to believe that while Assad was there was some kind of peace. There was that there was opportunity.
Yeah.
This couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, I'm not saying this for my own opinion. I'm saying this because I've talked to dozens, maybe 100 Syrians that tell me differently. That there was utter lack of opportunity. There was absolute control from the minority because it took them 42 years to get it that way. They wanted absolute control of the technology sectors, of the real estate, of occupations. Everything is under control. So yeah, maybe they lived in an assumed peace because as long as they were quiet and they didn't speak out against the government, they were allowed to coexist peacefully in neighborhoods. But the moment that you spoke up, the moment you said anything, you were taken away. And and like they said in Dara, after today there is no fear. People refuse to live like that anymore. Well,
people are tired. They're sick of living this life. This is not a humane right for any person to live like that. So they're saying now that this is enough. We've had enough. We just want to end this and just live in peace and really really live from generation to generation and speak of our country in a good way, not having to mention, oh, this is what I have gone through, or our difficulties, So it's really unfortunate because my parents, talk about it, till this day. They're like, we as we were being raised, we have minimum limitation on what we can do, and we had to be very cautious. And so our parents were very strict on things that we visited. So. And in terms of religious background too, you rarely can practice your religion too, and I think people are also sick of that too. As me living here, I do have a lot of freedom to practice, to pray, to wear my hijab that I have on right now. But a lot of people in Syria are not able to do that, and that's another aspect of part of the whole the pro-regime and all that accounts with freedom. So that also plays a role too. And also to add on, excuse me if I interrupted you, the Assad regime will try to find excuses to say that it's somewhat of a terrorism. Because, of course, here in America, unfortunately, we relate the term terrorism to Muslims, specifically Arab Muslims. And so the Bashar Assad has found an easy way out to compare that to terrorism. But there is no such thing as terrorism. The people who are exactly causing these issues is the Shabiha, which are the soldiers that are with the regime. Opposed to the Free Syrian Army, they're just trying to calm things down. They want peace. They want this all to end so people can live happily. But they continuously say it's terrorism and that he's taking care of them. And to add on that it's a civil war. There is no civil war. That is all stereotyping to make it seem like it's a catastrophe going out of hand. But again, it all goes back to Bashar Assad that is causing all that tension.
And I could cite from the very beginning. I mean, I've been aware since May 2011. I mean, I saw as early as August 2011 evidence that the Iranian regime was completely behind Assad, not only in donated $5 billion to the government, realizing that the sanctions were going to increase, but also in sending their troops on commercial air flights with weapons on Assyrian soil very, very early. So, people want to push this outside Wahhabi, Salafist, Al-Qaeda baloney because it's easy to destroy a bridge and leave that moat there in understanding. And people can remain ignorant that way. If I'm ignorant, then I can remain fearful and somehow feel that the distance makes me feel secure, that I'm away from that chaos, that I'm away from responsibility of humanity. Well, it's not going to happen. People are involved. With the millions of dollars being thrown as damage control over a situation that has been allowed to happen for 2 years, there's going to be equal blame and equal responsibility for everybody. Everybody on this earth is going to end up paying for this. And this is what we've warned all along. If you allow this vacuum to happen, if you allow this chaos to proliferate with the weapons that are allowed to get into this country, we are all going to inevitably pay for this. And
that's true.
And I try like hell to get people to understand, before you use the word jihad, maybe you ought to learn the word shabiha. Because
that's right. That's right.
Two go hand in hand. You wanna go ahead and use the word jihad, thinking it somehow describes a whole swath of people, when really it only describes struggle. And college is a jihad for a teenager. Being able to afford a house is for a 30-year-old. I mean, use the language properly. People need to know what the word shabiha means, or militia, or killing squads. I mean, it means ghost, does it not?
That's the unfortunate thing here in America is that, sometimes I think of it this way: it's not really the citizens' fault. It's because they're being brainwashed constantly and consistently with the media that's being exposed. If I knew very little about Syria and I wasn't Syrian or Muslim, I really would portray them as whatever society is looking at them upon. But really, we need to get down to reality and really educate ourselves and do our own little job of researching what exactly is going on in Syria. Not to base everything off of the media, because the media is a win-win situation. They're going to do what's possible to brainwash every citizen to think that we are quote-unquote terrorists, and that we just want harm to our country. So we need to step out and take that role and actually, do a little job by ourselves and find out what exactly is going on in Syria. And when you look at reality, or when I speak to a few people that know nothing about Syria, they're just shocked. They're traumatized. They're like, we can't believe this is what's happening. Hearing it from someone that comes from Syria like me. So I also wanted to add other things about the Assad regime. Right now, conditionally, what's happening is buildings and roads and power supplies have been really, really down. Electricity, people have been out. I have family members that have been out for almost 10 days without electricity, no cooking. They're not able to shower, none of that. So they're basically living on, and there's barely any food. They can barely go out. They have to be at home within, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because the Shabiha are out, and they're threatening people who are and they're rapeful and they're kidnapping kids. So parents are really, are really scared. Schools and universities have been shut down. Small businesses are collapsing. Industrial and agricultural sectors are at a fatal hit, very severe fatal hit. Hospitals, there's no more hospitals. I mean, people are opening like little homes and they're just getting tools and getting just doctors to just, temporary medications for them just to last for a few days or to find help somewhere else, maybe in different refugees. But the condition is very bad, and everyone's getting worried because all across the country, everyone has, and we're able to contact them. Me, on my behalf, I have grandparents, and I just lost a grandma because the medication process was very hard for my grandma to get that, and so she passed away earlier than it was going to happen. So again, the condition's really bad now. I mean, people are just in their homes terrified now. They can't do anything. They can't go out. There's no electricity. Roads are damaged. People can't drive anymore. People are walking in and just stealing things from homes. It's a catastrophe right now. So, and this is what the Assad regime has done, and they are happy with this. They are satisfied because they want this to be corrupt. They want this to happen.
Yeah, I would totally back up everything you're saying because of how everything has spilled across borders. Assad has had the Mahdi army from Iraq get involved. He's had forces from Lebanon get involved, bombing into Syria. I mean, and from the very beginning, he spread this little yarn of sectarian violence, of these outside terrorists. Between his father-in-law and Asma's dad, and the logistical support that he got from Iran, that's what he wanted to push all along. You can't have unity if you can foster divide. If you can have people fighting against each other, if you can have, Kurds fighting the Jabhat al-Nusra in the north, if you can have these people dividing, well, then you are effectively destroying their success.
Right.
We all know if we stand together, united, we can't be divided. So that's his whole aim all along, is to divide support, is to slow down action. It is to give every reason in the world not to do something. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what he knows about these governments. He must have some very important information on them, because the moral compass of our world leaders is completely broken. There has to be a reason why this inaction happened for this long. These governments know better than even I, and I'm on the internet constantly. I know on the hour what's happening there. There's people given passports to paradise now. I saw a picture from Helen Dayum. She put a picture on Facebook today. It's an actual passport that they're giving these Iranian Revolutionary Guards and these Hezbollah, that if they come into Syria and kill, they have a passport to paradise. So this is the kind of thing that we're fighting. That this meaningless senseless slaughter, for what? For the power of a seat? For Russia to have their warm water base in Tartus? For the profiteering to keep going on? For what? What is the strategic sense of destroying a country that's the cradle of civilization? Where is the benefit of destroying buildings that are thousands of years old in Aleppo? They're looting architectural sites.
Well, not to mention, they're also destroying, the place where Muslims worship. You can imagine if someone is praying peacefully in their mosque, they call it the mosque where they pray, and someone just bombards the area and bombs it and then leaves. And not on top of that, they also take the people and imprison them because they were just praying peacefully, not bothering anyone. So this has gone beyond chaos. Now some people are just in their homes, just trying to stay safe until they hope that things will calm down. But yet, even those people that are in peace are being harmed. So it is pretty bad right now. And also to add on is there's been a dictatorship for years in Syria. It all goes a long time ago when the French ruled Syria, and it moves on. But it's been really bad. The president before that, Bashar, was his father. And that itself is a dictatorship, because the citizens were not able to vote, were not able to preach who they wanted to rule a government. They say that it's a democracy. It's nothing called or close enough to democracy. It's been basically a dictatorship, and they've been denying that. The father ruled for many years, and on top of that, passed it to the son with no option to the citizens. So that itself is a dictatorship. With no action done, that itself is dictatorship. And, you know, the civilians have they're fed up with this. They can't take this anymore. You know, they can't do anything without, you know, the government interfering with anything. So yeah, that itself, dictatorship has been continuous and on for years. But people were just fearful.
Yes, and I would add that, not being Syrian again, but, you know,
Right.
hearing what you just said and knowing a lot of the conversations that I've had with people that are from Hama, from all over Syria,
Right.
that this has been a long time coming.
Right.
The spark that ignited this uprising, you know, if it was supposedly this imperialistic idea, it's all a lie. You know, this was started by some kids that decided to speak out and got punished for it, got tortured for it. So,
Yeah.
you know, if that's the reason that there was going to be a regime change, if that's what we're attaching to the back of this uprising as some kind of conspiracist idea, that argument's ridiculous. Because people were, you know, under a water shortage. That was part of why they were protesting. They asked for reform from Assad peacefully. In less than 100 people, they showed up asking for their children that were detained, beaten, tortured in Dara. And when they asked for their children back, Assad immediately told them, you know, either make more children or we'll send our army there to rape them.